The original Smackdown vs. Raw was a huge step in rebranding a classic game series. Following the roster split of Raw and Smackdown, natural divisiveness and tribalism occurred between the two brands, and WWE would merge all of their console efforts into one title series, the infamous and widely beloved Smackdown vs. Raw series. Despite being the first game with the new branding, this is actually considered as the 6th installment in the Smackdown series. This game doubled down on a lot of things that had worked well for its predecessor, Here Comes the Pain, and added new features as well as a wild story mode. But one thing this game is not fondly remembered for is the roster. Including legends and divas, this game only had a roster of 52 playable wrestlers, a step down from the roster of 64 the year prior. This roster may have had the least amount of star power in the whole series, and we're going to see what hypothetical additions may have been able to change that. Number 1. Brock Lesnar and Goldberg. I think it's fitting to combine the two megastars here, given their departures from the WWE came at the same time, right after their infamous WrestleMania 20 match. These two behemoths had track records that spoke for themselves at this point, both in and out of the ring, and the duo was heading for a WrestleMania collision that could have been one of the biggest of all time. While it will likely be talked about throughout our days, it's not for reasons anyone would prefer. Everyone knew heading into the WrestleMania showdown that this was going to be the last match in the WWE for both Brock and Goldberg. Their impending departures, along with a general lackluster effort in showing, led this to be one of the most poorly received WrestleMania matches of all time. This was a bitter end to two dominant runs from stars that the crowd was really behind at the height of their popularities. It's almost strangely symbolic, as the cover stars of the two WWE game titles, Smackdown and Raw, didn't make any appearances in any of the games that in principle combine the two franchises. The WWE roster was undergoing a major transition at this time, ushering in a crop of future legends in the making. While the core of superstars like Kurt Angle, Triple H, Undertaker, and Shawn Michaels were present in this game, there was a level of star power that was missing from the first of the new look game series, and had WWE just ate their pride and paid the royalties, their game would have greatly benefited from it. Number 2. Scott Steiner. The Big Bad Booty Daddy made his return to the WWE in late 2002 and would immediately be thrust into the main event scene competing against Triple H in Evolution, making attempts at the World Heavyweight title, though he was never successful. Unfortunately, due to the poor reception of these world title bouts, Steiner fell out of favor of the WWE spotlight. This would see his main event push come to an abrupt end shortly after his return to the company. Steiner would end up becoming just another guy on the roster, leading to his release in August of 2004, following an injury that had kept him sidelined for some time. Even though he was no longer on the roster when the game had come out, his omission is an unfortunate one, as throughout this series, we have discovered that being on the roster at the time of release is not a requirement for being in the game. With this in mind, Big Papa Pump should not have been withheld from the game. His entrance and moveset are both available in the Creation Suite, and of course they had his character model from Here Comes the Pain. Scotty Steiner was also left out of Day of Reckoning for the GameCube, a game that was released months before Smackdown vs. Raw, which gives me the impression that there weren't any real plans of including him in Smackdown vs. Raw from the jump, even had he been healthy and on the roster when the game was scheduled to drop. Given the fact that the Smackdown vs. Raw roster only contained 52 superstars, it doesn't take any kind of certification in Steiner math to know that there was room for Big Papa Pump. Who do you wish you could have played as in this game? Drop your list down below in the comments, or tell me who I missed. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more Smackdown vs. Raw content. Number 3. Lita. The women's roster actually took a step back from the year prior, featuring only 6 women, whereas Here Comes the Pain featured 8 playable female characters. Lita returned from an extended absence in September of 2003 following a neck injury. Upon her return, since Jeff Hardy was no longer with the company and with Matt residing on the Smackdown brand, Lita refocused her sights once again on the Women's Championship and would feud with Molly Holly until the later part of the year. Lita would also take part in the first ever women's steel cage match against Victoria, though this is not a match she would win. Between her return and the time the game was released, Lita was paired up with big names like Chris Jericho, Christian, Trish Stratus, Kane, and Victoria, just to name a few. All of these wrestlers made it into the game. Lita was an active rising star at this time that was overlooked for other talent to be selected and implemented into the game, and there really is no other explicable reason why the WWE and Ukes decided to keep her out other than they just had a set number of females to fit into the game, and they didn't feel she should have made it over some of the other women. And to be honest, it would be hard to argue Lita's inclusion over any of the ladies that were chosen, given both she and they were all either former or current women's champions at the time of release, or uber popular outside of the ring like Sable, Stacy Keibler, and Tori Wilson. However, that doesn't mean there's no argument to be made for Lita, because she certainly deserves her own roster spot as well. Lita had a unique look an innovative moveset, and wasn't afraid to put her body on the line to entertain the crowd. Her omission from this game was definitely a mistake, though this mistake would be rectified after they made the adjustment and decided to include Lita in the WrestleMania 21 game, which would release less than a half a year later. Number 4. The Hurricane. Hurricane Helms is probably one of the most popular and well-received characters in sports entertainment history to have never won any kind of prominent singles championship. The Hurricane would leave an unforgettable impression throughout the lifespan of the character. While Gregory Helms should certainly be remembered for his work outside of the Hurricane character, you cannot deny his run as the roster's crime fighter was the most significant and memorable of his career. After securing a huge upset victory in a mini feud with The Rock, the Hurricane spent the majority of 2003 and 2004 paired up with the superhero in training, Rosie, building up a very memorable tag team bringing in the Ruthless Aggression era. The two would eventually win the tag team championships, but not in time for this to be relevant to the game in question. The Hurricane may not have been setting the world on fire or carrying any gold during the development of the game, but that should not have cost him a feature in this game. This is somebody who was featured in Here Comes the Pain after all. I mean, if you're going to feature guys like Chuck Palumbo, Garrison Cade, and Rico, some of whom were not even signed with the company within a week of the game's release, it only makes sense the Hurricane makes the cut. In fact, it's rather criminal that Hurricane Helms is nowhere in sight. What's up with that? Number 5. La Resistance. You know, I really thought I was going to have my opportunity here to finally make mention of Billy Kidman, someone who was overlooked multiple times in multiple games. I thought I had that chance, but instead, while doing research for this project, I knew I had to seek out one thing: omitted active champions. Lo and behold, La Resistance. The team of Robert Conway and Sylvain Grenier held the World Tag Team titles, and in addition, on Smackdown, not only was the United States Champion Carlito omitted, but the WWE Tag Team titles were held by Kenzo Suzuki and Rene Dupree, and the Cruiserweight Champion was Spike Dudley. 5 total active champions at the time of release. At least Rene Dupree had made the game's roster. Carlito had just debuted in early October, and Kenzo Suzuki's body of work doesn't quite stack up to the duo of Conway and Grenier, so they get the nod here. The duo would capture the World Tag Team Championships on the November 1st edition of Raw after they defeated the team of Chris Benoit and Edge, the day before the game was released. Grenier and Conway had been a part of the Raw roster and firmly planted into the tag team division since early to mid 2003, and had even won the titles for their first time in May of 2004. Sometimes some guys just don't make it into the game, but when a game is literally missing a third of the active champions on release,
something is wrong here.
Normally, I'd do an honorable mention segment, but I gave you a few freebies with the mentions of Rosie, Billy Kidman, Carlito, and Kenzo Suzuki, all of which would be welcome additions to the game. However, I do want to give some praise to this roster for correctly featuring Victoria in the game. If you've been watching any of these videos before, you'd be well aware of my desire for the inclusion of one of the baddest women of the Ruthless Aggression era. So props here, but this game would then go on to drop the fucking ball for the next 3 years, which you can find out about in these videos below. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.